Welcome to MacStories Unwind, a weekly review of everything MacStories and more. Today's show is brought to you by Tempo, the minimalist email client. I'm John Voorhees, and with me is our editor-in-chief, Federico Viticci. Hey, Federico.
Hello, John. How are you?
I'm doing really well. It's Friday. Once again, here we are doing Unwind, and we've got stories to cover. So let's dive in and start at the top with a fairly big review I did this week, which was my 2-month review of the M1 iMac. And I always like writing these hardware reviews because they're very different than the kind of things that you write when you have review hardware and you're getting ready for a launch day and you're under a tight deadline and you really don't have a lot of time to, live with the hardware. I've had 2 whole months to live with this iMac, and it's really grown on me. I was kind of surprised, really, because the iMac is the very first Mac I had back in 2006, but I haven't had an iMac in years, and I've kind of preferred living on laptops and Mac Minis in the meantime. And I kind of explained why that is, why that transition happened for me and kind of for my family in general, and why now the iMac suddenly seems to make sense again for me. And it's a combination of things. First of all, it's the relocation of my office to the first floor of our house, but it's a bunch of other things too. And it's hard to explain, but it's one of those things. It's a combination of the clean kind of minimalist design where I don't have a lot of junk sitting on my desk, and I have a really crisp, incredibly clear display. It's a 4.5K display, and boy, it really looks good. I mean, the colors, the crispness of the text. The only thing I think that if I had bought this for myself, this is a loaner from Apple that has to go back, but if I'd bought it for myself, I would have, gotten more storage. This only has 500 gigabytes of storage, which actually hasn't been too bad because a lot of things are offloaded to iCloud Drive and Dropbox anyway. But I would have gotten more storage. I would have gotten a color because this is a silver one, although it does fit in very nicely with really anybody's home decor because it just kind of fades into the background being silver. But I would have also liked a bigger screen. Now, the screen is 24 inches, and I've been surprisingly happy with it. I thought, because I was coming from a 27-inch 4K display that I use with my Mac Mini, I thought I would really miss those extra few inches, but it really hasn't been the case. I mean, part of that is that it's 4.5K, and so you get a fair amount on the screen anyway, but it's also just such a good quality display that I haven't really missed being on something bigger. So it's definitely other than that, I guess the internals are really just the same as my MacBook Air and the M1 Mac Mini that I tested at the beginning of the year. So there's not really a lot to say about that. It's fast, it's quiet, it's cool, but it's just like those other computers in that way. But this one really distinguishes itself because it's the first design that is just for the M1 chip, allowing for that incredibly thin 11 millimeter thick design, as well as all the other aspects of it that are really cool. So that was the review.
Yeah, so you like it, and you could see this as your future computer when you eventually have to return this to Apple. You could see yourself having an M1 iMac, like for you in your household.
I really could. And the thing that's going to be hard for me when I return this, I've actually got it for a little bit longer, but when I do return it, I'm very curious where Apple will be on the rest of the M1 lineup, because I'd really like to see if a bigger iMac is coming with some M1 chip, because that's really what I want. And I may have to live kind of in an in-between stage for a little while to see what happens with that before I decide whether just to kind of maybe get myself one of these or to get something else or just kind of return back to the M1 Mini. I don't know. I haven't really decided. I'm going to wait and see what happens this fall with announcements.
All right. So you also reviewed Carrot Weather version 5.3, which launched earlier this week, and it comes with a fun addition and some changes to the smart layout. So I want to talk about the fun feature first.
Right.
So there's a new weather report feature that lets you record using the selfie camera, sort of like a weather report, and it gives you this fun transcript, sort of to as if you were like a weather person on TV, and it gives you a funny name. Like I believe the name that you used in the demo video that you did for MacStories was Chip Cyclone. Was your weather person name, and it gives you a transcript that you can read off, and it gives you data on screen, and eventually then you export everything to video, and you can share these on social media. So how was reading a weather report like for you, John?
It was fun making the video. It's a little hard getting used to because you can tell looking at me in the video that I'm reading. It's a little hard to do that and record yourself at the same time because you can't really look at the camera but also see the words that are scrolling up the screen, because what it does is before it starts recording, it gives you a little circle to kind of know where to center your head, and then it scrolls the words up on the screen as you're recording so you can read them. And it works incredibly well. I mean, I had a lot of fun with it. You can pick any name you want, which is kind of cool. And it's designed for sharing. And I wouldn't be surprised if we see an awful lot of this on places like TikTok and Instagram and Twitter for that matter. So it's a fun feature. The other thing, Federico, that was in this update, which is a little more practical, I guess, is that the layouts, which is, back in 5.0, Carrot Weather added the ability to customize the layout of the app to include the data and the look that you want. And this update to that system allows you to pick different layouts for different situations. And there are 3 different situations. There's default, which is kind of the existing layout. And then you can pick separate layouts for nighttime and for when it's going to rain, which makes a lot of sense because, for instance, in the evening, you probably don't want to know any longer what the high temperature for the day is going to be because it's probably past that at that point in the day. And then if it's going to rain, you might want either your weather radar or a graph of when it's going to rain, one of those dark sky style graphs higher up in the layout so you can see it and plan your day accordingly. So you can do that now, which I've enjoyed doing. I just made a few tweaks to my base layout for those situations, and it hasn't been raining here since I've been testing it, but it is kind of nice in the evening to have a layout that's more focused on what's going to happen the next day and further into the week instead of the day that you're still in. So that's nice. Plus, there's separate data sources for things like air quality, a few other tweaks to some of the layout options and things like that. But the headline features are really the weather report and these specific layouts for rain and evening time. The next thing we had this week, Federico, is that today Skate City came out with an all-new level for Tokyo, Japan. And this is pretty neat. I actually had a chance to speak with the Snowman team about this a little bit. And this is the first year that skateboarding has been an official sport at the Olympics ever. And so they wanted to do something special, and they've been thinking about doing some sort of event-based thing with Skate City at some point, but nothing had really clicked or been what they wanted to do until this. And so to kind of commemorate and celebrate the fact that it's part of the Olympics this year, they created a level for Tokyo, Japan. And it is amazing. It looks so nice. It's got lots of, it's got that look that you would expect with a lot of neon in the downtown Tokyo area and a new soundtrack that goes along with that particular level. Bunch of challenges, bunch of goals. It's, I think, their biggest level, they said, that they've ever added to the game. So great and worth checking out. And, I'll tell you, Federico, I'll talk about this a little bit later when we talk about arcade, but it is fantastic to play this game on a Backbone 1 because you have those.
Oh, nice.
You've got those thumbsticks that you can flick, and you've got the shoulder buttons and everything. Really nice to be able to do that. And then finally, Kanye West did a live stream last night of his album that's coming out.
Yeah, I missed this one, unfortunately.
Well, it was late. I will tell you that we had someone in our household who stayed, who wanted to watch it, and it was over an hour and a half late, I think.
Okay.
And the album still hasn't dropped. Originally, it was said it was supposed to drop today on Spotify and Apple Music and everywhere, but it's not out yet, and it's unclear when that's going to happen. So, not exactly sure what's going on there and why you would do a listening party for an album that's not maybe finished yet, but it is notable from an Apple Music perspective because Apple hasn't done a lot of these kind of event-driven type of things in the past. They did a live performance with Billie Eilish, an interview with her too, before her documentary came out. But beyond that, there haven't been that many performances or other live events with Apple Music. And I'd like to see them do more of it. So it was a neat thing and a little different than some of the other things that have been done in the past.
Yeah, and in pure Kanye West fashion, the album still hasn't dropped anywhere on streaming services.
Right.
I was just checking out on Twitter. There's all kinds of frustration and amusement by fans of West because he said that Donda, the name of the album that has been named after his late mother, Donda, who died in 2007. Originally, this album was supposed to come out last July. And it was delayed a bunch of times. And he said he was going to do this listening party at the Mercedes-Benz Stadium in Atlanta, where I believe 40-something thousand people attended the show. And he said that the album was going to drop today, but as of almost my 9 p.m. Italy, it still hasn't shown up. For context, albums come out at midnight Eastern, so midnight New York, which will be my 6 a.m. on Fridays. And it's 9 p.m. and there's still no sign of the album. So I don't know. We'll see.
Yeah, it's more than 12 hours since then. And there's even been some speculation, I think, that the listening party was not the entire album either, that they may still be working on some of the songs. So who knows when you're going to see this, but you would think soon. All right, Federico, why don't we talk a little bit about Club MacStories and what was in Weekly this week? You did another installment of your Obsidian series, right?
I've continued my Obsidian series with part 2 of my Obsidian setup. This week, I've taken a look at the theme that I'm using, which brings a refreshed and minimalistic look to Obsidian, and its companion plugin that allows you to install custom fonts. So I also talked about how I was able to install Apple's SF Mono font, the latest version of it that you can download from Apple's developer website on iOS and iPadOS. I also talked about customizing some of the mobile features of Obsidian, like the mobile quick action, the custom toolbar that is shown above the keyboard, and I shared some of the third-party plugins that I'm using. Not all of them. Some of them will require a deeper exploration in the future because they are quite complex. But I figured after sharing some of the core plugins, so the built-in plugins, in part 1 of the series, I figured that in part 2, I wanted to start covering third-party plugins. So I still have a lot to cover. There's still a lot to come in this series. We'll see. I will probably eventually... I will have to slow down with these installments because I need to finish the iOS review and because we're working on a major project that we're finally going to launch in August. But for now, I want to write about my dashboard notes. I want to write more in depth about shortcuts and the integration with the Files app. So for now, this week, you can take a look at the theme that I'm using, custom fonts, mobile quick actions, and third-party plugins.
Yeah, that was a really good installment of the series. And I like the practical approach that you take to this because I know I do read things about Obsidian online and boy, they get awfully deep in the weeds and process sometimes. Yeah. And as soon as I get to that
have you come across the expression "my digital garden" yet?
Yes, I have, and all the Zettelkasten and stuff, and the slip boxes, and the numbering systems, and all that. And I get to that, and it takes away from it, I think, because there's value in a lot of these plugins that you can derive separate and apart from whether that is a system for you or not, and it's just not a system for me, which is why I like the way you approach this.
Thank you.
I have a couple of things in Weekly this week. One was a collection of screen recording apps, and I don't do a ton of screen recording, but it's something that I plan to incorporate more into what I'm doing at MacStories in the future. So I've been spending more time with these kind of apps, and one of them is probably not a surprise, which is ScreenFlow, which is an app that an awful lot of people use on the Mac to record their screen, but there were some other ones that I covered, as well as some ancillary apps that just kind of add some polish and unique characteristics to your recording. So I covered those as well. And then We got this rumor recently from Mark Gurman that there might be an always-on display on the next iPhone. And that really kind of made my ears perk up, because I have been spending an awful lot of time over the last several months with my iPhone and my iPad screen set to being on all the time, basically turning off auto lock. And part of that was the pandemic and the fact that I didn't go out a whole lot during the pandemic. And part of it was because I was using my iPad as a second screen to my Mac, and it was always a hassle to have it turn off after 5 minutes at most, even if I could quickly unlock it with Face ID. And I realized through the experimentation that the batteries, especially even on the iPhone, the battery on the iPhone 12 Pro Max at least, is substantial enough that even if I had my phone sitting on my desk with the screen on for a couple of hours at a time, it was totally fine. It didn't really drain it that much, and I could just kind of top it off here and there throughout the day and didn't have a problem at all. So I talked a little bit about that experience, as well as what I think we might see and what Apple could do to make an always-on display unique and different, which kind of ties into some of the wishes you and I had back in the day on App Stories pre-WWDC, and how some of those things might still come true, I hope, with an always-on display. All right, Federico, we had an interview in our summer series this week on App Stories too, and that was with Guy Rambo. And I really enjoyed talking to Guy, because Guy has his finger on the pulse of really what's going on with a lot of these new frameworks and APIs. And I got to ask him the question about what it's like to work with Bluetooth, which I kind of knew the answer to, which was it's really difficult and kind of awful. But it gave him an opportunity to kind of explain exactly why Bluetooth is pretty tricky from the standpoint of developing his app AirBuddy, which works with the AirPods Pro and the AirPods and a bunch of other peripherals. So we talked about that. We talked about Swift UI and shortcuts and a whole bunch of different things. So definitely go check that out. We've got one more interview coming in a few weeks, so stay tuned for that one. This episode of Unwind is brought to you by Tempo, the minimalist email client. Tempo takes the stress out of email by putting you in control of the process in a beautifully designed minimalist app for the Mac and iOS, where it's a beta. The secret to Tempo is right in the name. It puts you in charge of when you get messages. By scheduling messages to arrive in batches, you can work more efficiently and on the schedule that works for you. The delivery schedule is completely customizable to fit with your schedule too. The UI is clean and focused. The app takes cues from text editors with Markdown compatibility and a simple UI backed by powerful features. You can connect up to 5 Gmail accounts in just minutes, then decide when you want your messages to arrive, and you're ready to go. There's a long list of great features included, like quick replies, one-click unsubscribe from newsletters, a dedicated to-do tab to follow up with things later, separate sections for reminders, drafts, and newsletters, and a focus mode for concentrating on one message at a time. Also, you can receive a notification immediately outside your normal schedule on threads that you mark as VIPs. Your time is better spent outside your email client. Try Tempo today by downloading the Mac app and the iOS beta too. Our thanks to Tempo for their support of the show. All right, Federico, let's talk a little bit about arcade.
Okay, what you been playing?
Well, they've been on a tear lately, and Snowman's been particularly on a tear because last week we talked about Alto's Odyssey, The Lost City, and this week we talked about Skate City Tokyo, and I've been playing both of those.
Okay.
They're fantastic apps. I mean, people are already probably familiar with them because Alto's Odyssey came out in 2018, big favorite of ours at MacStories, and Skate City was a launch title for arcade. Now, the thing about these games is that when I first played them, I did not have the Backbone One, which is the controller that fits around the iPhone. And it's perfect for both these games because they both support controllers, which most of the arcade games do, I believe. I think I get the impression that that must be one of the requirements if you want to be on arcade. So Alto's Odyssey, Lost City, the Lost City pops up after a while in the game. I've started playing from the very beginning of Alto's Odyssey, just kind of playing it fresh, and I haven't gotten too far into the Lost City section, but boy, this game is just as beautiful as it's always been, and on the screen of a iPhone 12 Pro Max, it's just gorgeous, and the sound is good too. And plug in your AirPods Max and use those or the AirPods Pro, and it's just a really terrific experience, even better than the original. Because you think about it, it's been 3 years, and the hardware's just gotten so much better even in that short time.
Yeah.
And then Skate City too. I mean, I love the controller support here because you've got the ability to do tricks using the shoulder buttons, and you can use the thumbsticks to flick them and do other things. It's really neat, and I think the game is particularly good because it really eases you into figuring out what those controls are and what each one does. Because there's a lot of different controls that are at play here, and you can at the same time record what you're doing and share the videos, which is fun too. Nice. And with this update, there's a whole new level with like 50 different goals and achievements that you can get. So all around, great experience and worth revisiting if you haven't played it in a while.
Nice. And we also got some new releases on Apple Arcade today. I believe that Jetpack Joyride, the old side-scrolling platformer / endless runner game, has come back as part of a series of classic games that are coming back to Apple Arcade. I have fond memories of Jetpack Joyride from back in the day, so I look forward to playing this sort of remastered version on Apple Arcade. And also right. Neko Atsume, the popular kitty collecting game, is now available right. on Apple Arcade, which is very nice. I should check this out as a sort of chill and relaxing game. Also coming soon, Tetris Bits, which is a music-based spin-off of Tetris. I am really intrigued by this one. And Monster Hunter Stories. So this is a spin-off from the main Monster Hunter series, which is a really, really complex role-playing game. But the Stories spin-off is a more approachable sort of action RPG, cartoonish style take on this franchise. Originally came out on 3DS. Now it's coming to Apple Arcade. I really wanted to play Monster Hunter. I never really played it. And when the latest one, I don't remember the name, came out on Nintendo Switch a few months ago, I thought, I'm going to play this one. But like even the first 30 minutes is so complex and the barrier to entry is so high. So I'm just going to play the Stories version for less experienced players like myself when it comes to Apple Arcade.
Yeah, I think that's probably best. I was a little scared off by Monster Hunter 2. That's not a game. That's not a game I'm going to play. All right, let's go to our Unwind picks. And I got to say, Federico, you've got an album this week, and I was going to give you a hard time for not telling me about this earlier because I actually discovered this earlier this week and listened myself. And it's a great album. And you, I guess it came out actually a couple of weeks ago, and I didn't realize it.
Came out a couple of weeks ago. I hadn't fully listened last week. So this is the new record by The Main called XOXO From Love and Anxiety in Real Time. So I loved the previous record from The Main called You Are Okay from 2018. XOXO is a really, really good, I would say, pop rock album. The Main started off as a sort of a pop punk band, and there's still some of that in their latest records, but really I would describe this as an alternative rock or pop rock album. It runs at 35 minutes, so it's really easy to listen to. And each song is 32 minutes, 10 songs, which is refreshing in the age of albums comprised of 18, 19, 22 songs. And this is just 10 songs, 32 minutes. Each song is a hit. From my perspective, each song has a place on this record, which feels very honest. Like The Main and their lyrics, they're very honest and sometimes rough, but also like inspiring and optimistic. And I just love the refreshing sound of this record with The Main, trying some different sounds, trying some more electronic sounds in places. Some of my favorite songs on this record, if you want to know my highlights, I would say Lips, If Your Light Goes Out is a really beautiful song. And also, I would say the closing song, Face Towards the Sun. My God, that's a beautiful song. And it's a really, depending on sort of the color that you want to read into that song, it can be a difficult song to listen to, but I think it's the perfect song to close an album. So yeah, this has already shot all the way up to my list of top albums of the year. You Are Okay was my favorite album from 2018. So yeah, I'm listening to this one multiple times a week. Like I'm shuffling songs every day. I absolutely love this record.
Yeah, I really like it too. I've only had a chance to listen to it once, so I'm going to spend some more time with it this weekend. But Lips is one of my favorite tracks on there too. My pick for this week is Hacks, which is a TV series on HBO Max. I think it's 10 episodes total. It started coming out in May, so it's completely out now if you want to binge it. They're about an hour long each. And it's a story of an older comedian who is in Vegas telling kind of a very traditional style of doing a very traditional kind of show and traditional type jokes that feel very kind of old fashioned. And then it's the story too about a younger woman who is a writer for television and gets essentially canceled online for telling a joke in poor taste. And the two of them get paired together by their agents because the older comedian is on her way out and the newer comedian has been canceled and nobody wants to hire her. And so they get put together, and it's this kind of boomer and zoomer type of relationship that they have a lot more in common than they realize at first. And it's all about their interactions and kind of the way they interact together. And I really love this because there's a comedian, it's a funny series. There's no doubt about that. But there are also a lot of touching moments. And the New Yorker does a really good job of kind of explaining this kind of this generational conflict that is addressed by the show. And I'll link that in the show notes too. But it does a really nice job of kind of seeing how the younger person doesn't really understand the older person doesn't really understand the younger generation, and how they find a way to actually, in the end, start working together and benefit from knowing each other, and both as people, but also as creative people who are making jokes and, doing productions at Vegas and so forth. So yeah, really cool show, and I recommend watching it. I'm not all the way through, but I've gotten about halfway and have really enjoyed it. All right, Federico, that's it for another episode of MacStories Unwind. Happy weekend, everybody. You can find the two of us over at MacStories.net. Federico is on Twitter and Instagram, where he's at Viticci. That's VITICCI. And I'm at John Voorhees. JOHN VOORHEES. Talk to you next week, Federico.
Ciao, John.